police in America's biggest cities are failing to meet even the most basic international human rights standards governing the use of lethal force, a new study from the University of Chicago has found. Researchers in the university's law school put the lethal use of force policies of police in the 20 largest U.S. cities under the microscope. They found not a single police department was operating under guidelines that are compliant with the minimum standards laid out under international human rights laws. Among the failings identified by the law scholars, some police forces violate the requirement that lethal force should only be wielded when facing an immediate threat and as a last resort. Some departments allow deadly responses in cases of escaping suspects, fugitives, or prevention of crime, all scenarios that would be deemed to fall well outside the boundaries set by international law. In other cities, police guidelines failed to constrain officers to use only as much force as is proportionate to the threat confronting them. Remarkably, the researchers from the law school's International Human Rights Clinic discovered that none of the 20 police departments were operating under state laws that were in accord with human rights standards. America's biggest police forces lack legality, the study finds, because they are not answerable to human rights compliant laws authorizing the use of lethal force. The fact that police forces in the biggest U.S. cities don't meet very basic human rights standards is deeply concerning, said Claudia Flores, the clinic's director. The Chicago study underlines how far policing in America is adrift from international norms, making the U.S. a lonely outlier on the world stage. Across Europe, policing policies are much more closely aligned with human rights directives. In Spain, for instance, officers have to use verbal cautions and fire warning shots before they are permitted to aim at anybody. Chokeholds have been banned in Europe for many years. The Chicago researchers conclude too much deadly discretion is given to police officers in the U.S. The use of force, they say, is a form of state-sanctioned violence that society only grants police officers as part of their responsibility to protect public safety and enforce the law when necessary. The lax framework of U.S. policing has contributed, the authors say, to the spate of police killings of unarmed black people. Victims include George Floyd, whose death in police custody in Minneapolis in May sparked weeks of protests around the country. In an interview with The Guardian this week, Agnes Callamard, the UN monitor on extrajudicial, summary or arbitrary executions, said she was horrified because we are watching people dying in public at the hands of those who are supposed to protect us. Callamard's comments came as the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva held an urgent debate on racism and police conduct in the U.S. The need for restrictions on police power has